Hello, protocols, packets, and programs. The hosts and crew have the week off. We're using this episode to share 4 interviews recorded by our Security Weekly friends at last month's RSAC conference. This is still episode 332 for May 26, 2025. First up, we have Mark Lambert, Chief Product Officer for ArmorCode, talks about creating an AI-powered security champion. This is one of the interviews I conducted, and while it has a bit of AI anthropomorphization, it also shows a use for, no joking, small language models. Check it out. Next, Shahar Mann, co-founder and CEO of /Security, talks about vibe coding, which really just means code generated by LLMs, and whether that code is any more secure than any other way code is generated, vibes or not. Third in line, Brian Fox, CTO and co-founder of Sonatype, talks about AI from an angle of open source security and how modern developers want to write code, or maybe a little bit of how we wish and hope modern developers do write code, including AI or not. Finally, Aboul-Magd, VP of Product for Sandbox AQ, everything is security these days, talks about protecting non-human identities, there's my favorite, and cryptographic assets with, you guessed it, AI-driven solutions. As you can tell, AI was a major theme of this year's RSAC conference. Last week, we talked with Jeff Mann, made a similar comment about that. AI was everywhere. So we'll see what happens in RSAC 2026. But until then, give those a listen, and please remember to subscribe. Check out the show notes, share us on the socials, and we'll see you next time on Application Security Weekly.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
It's the show to learn the latest tools and techniques to understand DevOps, applications, and the cloud. Your trusted source for the latest AppSec news. It's time for Application Security Weekly. Think your terminal emulation is secure? Think again. Passwords and firewalls alone won't protect you. Cyber threats are evolving, and so should your security. Rocket Secure Host Access gives you phishing-resistant, password-free protection with leading-edge encryption. Your mission-critical systems deserve more than good enough. Secure your green screen access and stay ahead of the threat. Rocket Secure Host Access. The future of TE is now. Learn more at securityweekly.com/rocketsoftware. Welcome to RSAC Conference 2025. We're here recording live from the Cyber TV Risk Studio in Broadcast Alley at Moscone West. I'm your host, Mike Shima, and joining me for this interview is Mark Lambert, Chief Product Officer at ArmorCode. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you very much for having me.
So happy to have you here and spend a Tuesday afternoon talking about AI and Anya in particular. So just as a quick setup, I have a background talking to lots of human security champions.
Yes.
It's always been pleasant conversations with them. Why should I talk to Anya now?
That's a great question, especially because like everybody's talking about AI this week, right? I mean, it really is evident in the industry. So kind of like what is Anya and why is it important? How is it changing things? So really, if you think about it this way, as you're a security practitioner, you're working within lots of dashboards, reports, tables, lots of manual interactions, kind of like looking at the data. So you spend a lot of time crafting a dashboard, and then your CISO looks at the dashboard and goes, why is that risk score 600 when yesterday it was 300?
You don't want surprises.
No, you don't. So what do you now have to do? You now have to go in and start interpreting the data, digging around, figuring out what happened over the last 7 days, preparing a summary, and then if there's an incident, then you're going to have to prepare another email that the CISO can share with the board. What if an AI could just do all of that for you? So this was the genesis idea for Anya. And while dashboards and reports and kind of like human interactions and automation scripts, these are all going to be staples for the industry, Anya really revolutionizes and changes the way that we work with that data. And this didn't happen overnight. This was based upon research over the last couple of years, things that we've released over the course of last year as well.
Well, already I'm starting to feel I'm getting some compelling use here, some value. Just it sounds like it's saving me time.
Oh, yeah.
So I would definitely want to come back to that in a second. But you mentioned too, this is not, you didn't just do this last week.
Yeah.
And a lot of a promise of AI is that you need to train it. So it has so if it doesn't, so it can see something that it's seen before, it can evaluate that rather than this is new and I'll just make something up. So yeah, what did that look like to train it and that scope of that data?
Sure. So at ArmorCode, we often talk about our 3 Vs. This is what provides the foundation for our AI. That's volume. So we actually process over 100 million findings a day. So that's over 3 billion findings a month. Variety. So we're actually ingesting data from over 285 different sources. That's everything from threat intelligence and threat modeling, all the way through application security, cloud, container, traditional endpoint. And we're bringing all of that data into our platform and enabling our community of over 3,500 security practitioners that are supporting over 175,000 developers. So those 3 Vs provide a very solid foundation for us to develop true, meaningful, and valuable AI capabilities. This time last year at RSA, we introduced AI correlation, which was a supervised machine learning models that would connect together data from different scan types. So for example, taking software composition analysis data from a sneak and correlating that with a Trivy container security, for example, and connecting those 2 things together to say, hey, they're kind of the same underlying issue, so we're going to identify the unique elements and then kind of ignore or mark the others as duplicates. We then, at Black Hat last year, introduced our AI remediation that was an LLM, or is an LLM model pre-trained on vulnerabilities and weaknesses to, again, shortcut the time to figure out what to do to fix something. So, yeah, I might be able to update a library, but maybe I can't update it. What preventative controls can I put in place? Gotcha. That correlation, helping the root cause, that remediation, what do I need to do? We then brought those 2 things together in November last year to give you concise descriptions of remediation actions and remediation groups, basically where to do the work and what work to do. This was all the foundation for what we then started building Anya on top of.
And again, that to me sounds like this is a champion who's helpful in the sense of you, a developer, or me as a developer, you need to get your job done.
Yep.
What do I need to fix, rather than what are the intricacies of the OWASP top 10? And can be a little bit distracting. There's a time and place perhaps, but I appreciate that you mentioned too, like machine learning. There are obviously flavors of AI out there. Yep. So how do I use this? Is this is this agentic AI? Is this an MCP that I have local? How am I interacting with this security champion?
So what Anya is, and we do refer to Anya as the virtual security champion. It is a natural language interface. As you're working within the platform, you can call Anya up just generically within the platform and ask a general question about the data that is presented to you. So we have full RBAC control within the system. So you're only seeing the data responsible for your part of the application portfolio. I'm seeing the data that I'm responsible for. So you can call up Anya from anywhere, or you can call Anya up from within widgets within the dashboard. Okay. That gives it additional context. So you're saying, okay, you're asking a question about this widget. Anya is immediately prompted with that. Then it goes through 4 steps. The first thing is evaluating the question that you're asking, either just natural language interface or through that context of the widget. It then converts that into queries that are executed against the data model, retrieves the data from the data model, evaluates it, and then synthesizes it using an LLM to actually bring all of that data together in a human readable form. She takes into account the persona that you have. You can fully customize my prompt that is defining how I want information to be presented to me. And then she's agentic in that she will actually perform automation tasks for you. So things like, okay, what are my most risky findings? Do we have log4j in the place? Which teams are impacted? Create tickets for those teams, notify those teams, notify them on a weekly basis until those issues are resolved. These are the kind of things that Anya can do for you rather than you having to do that manual work yourself.
Tell me a little bit more about that help of just, do I have to fix everything? Because one of the traps that I've seen that will drive me crazy is, here are all the vulns, go fix them all. That's just a terrible conversation. It's a terrible strategy, and it just doesn't work. You're not going to get any friends that way.
Yeah.
How does using this agent help you with that prioritization? Do you have some examples of that?
Yeah, sure. And in fact, actually, the next level of non-working is to say, fix all the critical severity issues. That also doesn't work. Yeah. So what we do at ArmorCode is when we're ingesting the data into the platform, we apply our risk scoring model to it, which is actually a combination of technical risk, which is, in the case of a CVE, for example, leveraging threat intelligence. Sure. So if it's a critical severity finding, but it's never been exploited, do I really need to fix it right now? Probably not, okay? Yes. So we'll leverage threat intelligence to augment that. Secondarily, we will also take the business impact. So if that same finding that is actually exploited and it's on a critical part of my business that's processing payments, for example, versus a back-end data sciences application, which one do I need to fix first? Okay. And what we found is that prioritization helps the organization be a lot more efficient. So a mixture of the correlation to focus down and identify the uniqueness, and then furthermore using the risk scoring to identify the most criticals. But then that threat context provides the development team the reason why. Okay, yes, you need to fix this because there are experts.
Yeah. One of the challenges there is also like the AIs don't suddenly introduce, you magically now have an asset inventory or a software asset inventory, or everything has a business context behind it. How have you seen organizations, I think that organizations still struggle with that, AI or not. This is a classic problem.
Yep.
Is this helping, or how does the agent learn, or how does it make sure it gets a context for my org rather than just generic org, for example?
Sure. And not every answer has to be AI. Okay, so typically what we find is that many organizations have inventory sources. They're just not very well maintained and they're not very consistent.
Yes.
So the thing that we do at ArmorCode is we're ingesting all of the data, not just the vulnerability data and the finding data from the scanners, but also asset inventories from like CMDBs, chasms, even some of the vulnerability management tools themselves will have asset inventories also. We're bringing that data into the platform. We're then correlating that across the scanners. So for example, maybe I've got some data that's inside of my ServiceNow CMDB. I've got an asset inventory there. I'm scanning with Tenable, but I should be scanning with Qualys and it's not picking that up. Or maybe I've got some scanners that are duplicating, overlapping on the different resources. We're able to start providing that level of visibility. The key is really that connective tissue of how do I get the asset inventory and generate that from these different sources and then unify it within the platform along with the vulnerability data.
And I think that was a point too, that, or a subtler part of that point was that you're not a scanner, right? You're
100%.
That layer above, just taking in that context and exploiting that context, if you will, for the good. Right?
Yeah. And that's really where that foundation of the integrations with 285 scanners comes in. I mean, really, there are so many scanners in the industry today, and they work better in different scenarios. So many organizations will use, you can't just use one vendor to be able to do your application security and all your cloud security. It just doesn't actually work. Right. So, and even some teams will find that the different scanners work better in their environment when you start looking at AppSec, for example. Some organizations will move towards GitHub Advanced Security because it's actually easier to adopt than some of the traditional scanners, but maybe not as accurate. So we can leverage different technologies and bring them together. And really, we're very, very focused at ArmorCode of being that independent governance layer, sitting on top of not just application security, but also the vulnerability management and the software supply chain. Because this concept of application security posture management, it's not just the code. It's where it's deployed, and it's the code that you're using as well.
Yeah, and I think I wanted to go back too, because you talked about the CISO sees a dashboard, something changes, asking why, what happened. They're obviously not the only user of this. And you did mention about fixing code, and there's the AppSec of security champion. It sounds like an AppSec role, or maybe AppSec adjacent role. Who's using this? How are they interacting with it? Is it that developers? Is it AppSec?
It's a great question. Yeah. So what we talk about often is there are really three types of persona that use the platform. Okay. Our primary persona would be the application security or the cybersecurity security engineer who's in there working with the findings and the vulnerabilities and figuring out what's going on, and then assigning those to the development team potentially for remediation. Now, the developer is also a user of the platform, but not typically a direct user. They're not always logging into the platform. In most cases, they're living in Jira. So we will create tickets out of ArmorCode into Jira, and then we have a plugin for Jira that enables them to perform actions directly within Jira that are actually representing workflows inside of ArmorCode. So this kind of keeping them in the area where they're already working, because you don't want to disrupt their flow and their planning.
Thank you. Yes.
And then the third persona is the leadership, either CISO, security leadership, or development leadership as well. Also able to get customized dashboards that are in the platform and the insights that Anya provides.
Now, part of what you were telling us too is what ArmorCode was doing last year at Black Hat as well. Yeah. If we roll ahead to next year's RSA, or maybe even a little bit more in the future, how do you see this virtual security champion unfolding?
Sure, and there is one of the things we do at ArmorCode, which is one of the things I love, is we deliver innovation fast. So we actually have weekly releases. I do a monthly product webinar with the community. So actually, our next future is actually next month. So we're going to be talking about our AI Code Insights next month, which is where we're doing cloud to code correlation. We're doing code repo classification so we can start to detect what's inside the code repository so security teams can put better controls and risk posture in place, as well as material code changes for detecting for PCI compliance and things like that. So these are all of the things that kind of we're working on in the near term. But the thing that really excites me about kind of like this wave of AI, I was involved in the prior wave of AI as well. It's the potential. It's the potential for what the technology is able to do, and it truly is limitless. And that's actually what Anya means in Sanskrit. That's actually how we got to the name of Anya.
Okay.
So if I fast forward to this time next year, I think what we'll be looking at further is more autonomy from the point of view of the agent, more managing the agent almost like a team member to a certain extent. I don't think we'll ever get to the point where you just fully trust that your agent is going to, hey, we don't need security engineers.
Sounds a little bit sketchy,
But
yeah.
I think really, truly driving down that mean time to remediation, optimizing, removing the drudgery. I think that's kind of like the thing that we'll be hearing even more about next year as we look to RSA next year.
And that sounds, again, my favorite word of the day is compelling, because this is about saving me time, saving developers time is where the value comes, not just here are 2 letters called AI that we think is going to help you.
Yes.
And you also mentioned too that it's RBAC, it's working through your own permissions. So what are there other considerations that you had putting this together to be like, we don't want another security tool to increase our security attack surface? That's always a terrible thing.
Yeah. So as you can imagine, we're very fortunate. We work with some phenomenal organizations, but we're in security, so we have to take a security first approach. So what we didn't just do is just bolt on Anya using a ChatGPT interface. We also didn't just go, hey, let's point Anya at the documentation and give them the ability to navigate the documentation. We thought we went to the community and we said, hey, we've done correlation, we've done remediation. What's the next thing that you need to do? And that's how Anya came to be. But when we look at how we deploy, it's all contained within the ArmorCode environment. The instances of the LLMs are instantiated based upon your tenant, your role. They're segmented. They actually get destroyed afterwards. So we've taken a very security-first approach. We're leveraging AWS Bedrock. All of those kind of things that you would expect.
That's all. It sounds like you're going to have to add to those 3 V's, the 3 C's of that community communication. And,
Yes. We do like our 3 letters. So yes.
Well, I've very much enjoyed this conversation. I want to thank you so much, Mark.
Thank you so much for having me on today.
Thank you, everyone else, for joining us. To find out more about ArmorCode, please visit securityweekly.com/ArmorCode RSAC. For all RSAC, we got through the C in there, 2025 coverage by Cyber Risk Alliance, please visit securityweekly.com/RSAC. Thanks again, Mark. Thank you for everyone else. We'll stick around because we'll be back after the break with some more interviews live from RSAC Conference 2025.
Welcome to RSAC Conference 2025. We're recording here live from the Cyber Risk TV studio in Broadcast Alley at Moscone West. I'm your host, Matt Alderman, and joining me for this interview segment is Shahar Mann. He's a CEO and co-founder at /Security. Welcome, Shahar.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for having me today.
So we're going to talk about a very interesting topic around vibe coding. So before we go anywhere, what is vibe coding? For those who don't know, I actually know, but what is vibe coding?
Okay, so vibe coding, first of all, if you don't know what it is, that's okay. It's a very trendy new term. And vibe coding is about a new way to develop a code using AI and not just in a structured way, write the functions and do it yourself. Think about it as how we change from ChatGPT, from search at Google to ChatGPT for doing stuff.
Right.
So vibe coding is the equivalent for writing code. You can just ask for what you need and the code will be generated for you. Regardless of the tools that are popping up right now, there's several of them, but that's in general the trend. And it's absolutely amazing because it generates code in a way that expedite productivity that organization cannot really ignore how fast and it enlights them into a very different world of software development.
Yeah, so my board keeps asking me, can we use AI code to accelerate development? The answer is yes, I think. But the question is it producing secure code that I'd be comfortable deploying in my enterprise products?
Right. So that's the main question, especially as we're coming from the security domain. So how do we make this possible without compromising the code of the enterprise? And we just did a research. We checked it with the ChatGPT last model 4.1 and Claude 3.7. And we figure out that if you're not asking for security things, you're not going to get a secure code. Actually, 9 out of 10 times you'll get, for the common vulnerabilities, you'll get them inside your code if you're not cleaning it up and making sure it's okay.
Yeah, what I saw in the report was pretty interesting. Like it's really bad, but even if you tell it to produce secure code, it's still not producing fully secure code.
Right. So it's not, first of all, in order to make it secure, you need to ask for it. You need to have the awareness. And as it happens, when you're so excited with writing code, and we've tried educating and creating awareness on the development side for decades, they're excited about moving fast and creating the functionality. And if they're not asking for that, it's not going to happen with these models. As mentioned, 9 out of 10 times. Actually, the only one that will be got you covered, even if you're not asking for, is SQL injection. That, as it happens, it's probably became the poster child of vulnerabilities.
Right.
And the training that was so used to it, so also the outcome of these models will get you covered. But
So SQL injection is the one area that gets covered out of the OWASP top 10.
exactly, even without asking, you're pretty much in a good shape. Of course, in different situations, it might not be the case, but in our research, we showed that SQL injection, surprisingly or not, is probably the one that is the best. Yeah.
Well, that means we've improved as an industry at least over the last 10, 15 years or so,
Right.
because that was always in the OWASP top 10.
Right, absolutely. So what do you do about it? You can ask your developers, hey, whenever you're asking for code or functionality to be built by you, just make sure you're asking nicely to secure it as well. And it will get better results. So out of the 10, maybe 6 of them will be covered. But how about we look at this problem as an opportunity to have finally the enterprise policies for security injected into these IDEs, and making sure there's a bodyguard that works with the developer.
Yeah.
And in a very seamless way, without stopping them and asking them to scan the code and see the results, without knowing anything about security, the results are being refined for them. And in the same lightweight manner of vibe coding, the security will be injected into the code.
So even when you ask for it to be secure, there's still gaps.
Right.
Kind of what are the big gaps? Like what CWEs are not really being addressed, even if you ask for secure code? Because I think it's interesting is I go from 1 out of 10 to maybe 6 out of 10. That's still 4 areas of security weaknesses that you have to address. Is there a commonality across the different LLMs that you looked at?
Yeah, so we looked at, as mentioned, 4.1 ChatGPT. The latest Claude 3.7 was doing much better. But still, it only takes one vulnerability, and not CW, a specific vulnerability that will put you on risk. So it's not about being 90% versus 70%. You want to be 100% that the pattern is being matched. And you need a deterministic way for doing that, although the LLMs are not deterministic. So the way to do that is to have security deterministic knowledge injected to the prompts, and having the right methods in line being enforcing them, like MCP servers and inline plugins that helps you.
Yeah.
Actually, this is a great opportunity because as an industry, we've been looking for a way to go all the way left to the moment where the code is being generated.
Right.
And not only a gated approach that let the developers do whatever they want, but the PR will be stopped and let them, send them back to the drawing board and rewrite the code. Here it happens simultaneously with the code writing. This is a real opportunity to improve.
To fully shift left.
Right.
Where the guide rails, and we'll talk about policy in a second, actually helps build the secure code and continues to go through the CI/CD pipeline with all of its other checks, right? But this is the almost furthest left we can get.
Absolutely. The next left would be the minds of the
Yeah.
developers. We'll have a chip implanted into the developer's mind, maybe.
Maybe. So as organizations think about vibe coding, right? I think the first question is, do you allow it or don't you allow it, right? Because what I saw early on with AI, just in general, was this huge like ramp up of euphoria, like, oh, we're going to do it. And then people realize, wait a minute, we're not securing it. And they put a bunch of policies in place that basically said, no, you can't do this, right? We got to understand this first before we're going to allow it. So policy must be the first step in the process, allow or not allow. But then what's the next step in order to enable a secure vibe coding process?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and it really depends of the size of the company according to what we see with our customer base. So the ones that are on the bigger range, like a Fortune 100 company, are still in a pushback mode.
Okay.
They're gonna say, this is not happening. We look at vibe coding with horror. This is not computer science. This is not engineering. The quality of the code is not anywhere I need in an enterprise, so we're not going to allow it. If you use it, you get fired. This is how strict it is. But like with any technology trend, this is the first reaction before you can...
We've done this in security for a long time. We said no first.
Right, we say no first. And then some of them say, you know what, we cannot, especially on the mid-market,
Yeah.
they want to take the innovative advantage of the vibe coding because
Right.
you will produce innovation in ways and speed that never happened before, and they don't want to hold on this competitive advantage. So they embrace it in a very structured way, and then they run looking for a security guardrails
Right,
to
right.
make it happen.
Yeah.
The third one will be the ones that maybe over-adopting, the ones that are actually so excited with it, just loosen up the walls, let the developers do whatever they want, but they say, we anyhow invested in the gates of the old world, they're going to stop the new world problems. But I think this approach will not be sustainable because the amount of code will be very different.
Yeah, so that's interesting, right? When you think about this, we have existing checks in the CI/CD pipeline today.
Right.
We do our software composition analysis, we do our static reviews, we try to do DAST and testing and runtime, and then I've seen this huge uptick in runtime security here at this conference. So we have existing tools. Why won't they work? Is it a scale issue? Really, at the end of the day, is that you're producing so much new code that it will be too hard to use the traditional tools in the existing pipeline to do that? Or is there another gap still there?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that, first of all, let's be honest with ourselves. We don't see too many companies successful, even today, with shifting left security and having the gates there. It's a really nice slide
Yeah.
that you can present, but when push comes to shove and you need to deliver something, developers will not stop their pace and speed of development just because someone stopped them in the CI. We see that
Right.
all over the place. So security is a matter of risk taking. It cannot be 100% secure.
Right.
Given the new scale of AI, this will not hold. It cannot be the way to protect against vibe coding. You've seen the statements from the Google CEO about how 25% of the code is already written by AI. Up to 90% will be in the next 3 to 6 months. I think it was Claude's CEO mentioning that the revolution is happening in pace that we've never seen before. We have customers public customers last quarter told us it's not happening. We're not going to use Cursor AI tomorrow morning. That's okay. It's not part of our problems. We're going to look at it. This quarter, they tell us we need something urgent. That's the number one priority we need to look at when it comes to security. How do we figure out a sustainable way to enjoy it, but protect it in parallel?
Yeah, that's interesting. One last question. What does this do to the next generation of developers, right? If I think about what's going to happen, is students will start to learn this method of coding, I think, that will then accelerate this adoption even more. Does that change the way we have to think about coding education, coding classes, etc.? Because this could really accelerate some interesting things, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. I think that's the riddle on how that unfolds. I'll tell you a story with my two teenager boys. They did computer science class at high school. Took them a full year to create a week by week a movie gallery application. They were so excited to add the tiles and to have an edit a movie and have a login page after several weeks. And then by the end of the year, it was a really nicely shaped movie gallery web application. So I called them the other day and I used one of the new age IDEs. I went to the extreme and I took Lovable. And I asked the prompt of Lovable, hey, can you create for me a movie gallery app, make the tile nice, get it a login page, everything they need. I clicked one button, waited 1 minute, a couple of minutes, and boom, they got the full app, even nicer than what they've built. It was a jaw-dropping moment for them, and it was a jaw-dropping moment for me looking at them, and there you can see the wheels in their mind, and I got it, that the new type of developers in the next decade will need to know much less about engineering in order to create way more innovative applications. So it's here.
1 year to 1 minute.
That's the innovation. That's the scale of the revolution.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And it's our job to not stop it. It's actually, when you look at it in a broader scale,
Yeah.
security industry have missed so many trends because of our approach to first stop it. We did it with cloud. That was in my previous company. We did it with containers. We did it with VMware.
We did it with devices, bring your own devices. We did it with all kinds of things.
Right. And then it's kind of, security is going to be an afterthought.
Right.
Let's see how that evolves, and then we're going to react, and then you miss a few good years of actually being able to inject security from day one into what happens instead of, just be scared out of it.
Remember the concept, secure by design.
Yeah.
This allows you to build secure code up front, kind of by design. Remember, you're just putting in a prompt and it's building you the code. You can't get any more ground zero from a secure by design principle.
Right. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah. This is awesome. Shahar, thank you for joining me today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
If you want to learn more, please visit securityweekly.com/RSAC. Shahar, a great segment. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Stay tuned. We've got more interviews coming at RSAC Conference 2025. Welcome back to RSAC Conference 2025. We're here recording live from the CyberRisk TV studio in Broadcast Alley in the center of Moscone West. I'm your host, Matt Alderman. Joining me for this interview segment is Brian Fox, Chief Technology Officer and co-founder at Sonatype. Welcome, Brian.
Thanks for having me.
Little did we know yesterday when we had breakfast that you were going to be up here and I was going to do the interview.
Surprise for both of us.
I know. I didn't realize it until this morning when I looked at my schedule. We're going to talk AI, a lot of people talking about AI, but from this perspective, more about open source AI. Mm-hmm. And so let's start a little bit with kind of the challenges around what are people doing when it comes to AI, the LLMs. Are they hosting it? Are they pulling it down, using it themselves? It's a combination of both. What are you seeing trend-wise on how the LLMs are being used?
It's all of the it's all of the above, frankly. And the area that we focused on, that our customers were asking us to help them with, is to understand when developers are using LLM models inside their applications.
Yeah.
Right. So a lot of the focus is on AI-based tooling around it, that developers might be leveraging to produce better code, Copilot-like use cases, Chat GPT-like use cases. But what we're finding increasingly is that the developers are finding these small models that are tuned for specific things useful instead of writing complicated algorithms. And so they pull down these models, bake them in like any other dependency in their software, and then ship it. And so this is sort of, out of sight, out of mind, is what we're finding. We're finding, even I was surprised how many times we're finding those in applications. I was thinking, nah, they're not doing that. That's not, and I was wrong. And so, I've been coaching a lot of leaders. If you're not looking for this, if you don't have tools to look for it, just because you don't know it's there doesn't mean it's not there.
Right.
And so that's kind of the part that we're seeing, and we're trying to help people.
And so this obviously mirrors the early days of open source software too. We had kind of the same evolution, right? Yeah. People were pulling down open source software, embedding it into their applications, had no idea it was there. Then you realize, oh, it's there. Oh, crud. Now, is it vulnerable? And all the other downstream effects. Kind of same thing here, right?
That's right. When we started solving, this problem, the open source governance problem 15 years ago, we would talk to leaders that said, nope, we're not using any open source. And we run the Maven Central repository. So all the world's open source Java components get downloaded from our infrastructure. And so we'd look at the logs and say, you downloaded 100,000 components from us last year. The fact that you think you're not using open source is a glaring hole, right? Yeah. And it's the same thing, because in their mind at the time, open source was Linux, OpenOffice, Firefox, these types of things, not the fact that 90% of their software was actually open source. Now, if you ask the developers, of course, they'd be like, yeah, of course we are. Why are you even asking? Right. And you get the same response for AI. It's the leaders who aren't aware that this rapid adoption is happening. And so there's the Wild West kind of aspect of this. And that's what we're trying to help people manage.
Yeah, so I assume this starts with inventory.
It does. If you don't know you have it, how can you even begin to manage it?
So do you use similar techniques in doing kind of status software composition analysis techniques to find these libraries embedded in the code? Is that where we start?
That's exactly right, because from our perspective, they are just another open source component.
Okay.
They're big ones.
Yeah.
They're a little hairy and a little hard to quantify, but they are at that level just more components, right? So that's why it was easy for us to expand our platform to be able to do that. But what we've discovered as we've looked into this is there's a whole new set of metadata that you care about, right? So when you're thinking about open source dependencies, you tend to think about what's the open source license? Does it have any known vulnerabilities? Increasingly malicious, but that's a little bit of a side conversation. And what are the quality, right? Those are the three typical domains of open source components. When you start thinking about AI, well, of course you have still the license and the vulnerabilities, but now you have to deal with the license. What is the license of the software? What is the license of the model and the data that it was trained on? Might not be the same. Right. What are the tuning parameters? And then there's other aspects. OWASP has defined a new top 10, the AI top 10, right? So it's things like these components have excessive agency. They can go off and do things, not just talk about things, right? They may be trained on not safe for work data. They may be biased, right? So besides the license and security, you have like all these new dimensions that you need to be able to understand. What are these models? What are the different parameters? Are they fit for our purpose? You don't want to bake one of these LLMs into your application and have it start spouting off at your customers. Right. And yet that's a very real possibility, because we're seeing these things are in applications and nobody who cares is really governing them. So of course that's a possibility.
So how do you determine those extra components, right? Because unlike a vulnerability, right? These may be more dynamic or somehow buried, right? Like there's not like this library, I don't think, you tell me if I'm wrong, but there's not like this library of, hey, by the way, here's all the LLMs and here's all the different parameters about them, and you just search for those. You have to figure it out somehow else.
It's still, I would say, very much an evolving space.
Okay.
There are metadata that you can collect from certain places. You can understand in some cases what the backstory on the model is, but there are a lot of unknowns, and the fact that it's unknown is a finding as well. Right?
Exactly.
So if you can't attest to what these things are and where they are, you need to assume that they might not be safe. But again, it's the visibility, like you said, the discoverability, the visibility is the most important thing. And then you go from there. So I think there's going to be a lot of evolution in the ability to understand and track these things. But one of the interesting challenges around AI is that its power comes from the fact that it's not deterministic, that we didn't have to code every behavior, and yet it does some cool things. That's why we want to use it. Also, that means it's really hard to assess and test. If you take a piece of open source, people don't do this, but in theory, you could read all the code and understand what it does and get comfortable with the fact that there's nothing nefarious in there.
Right.
That's just not possible with AI, because there's petabytes and even more, whatever the next level is, of data in these models behind it. You can't review that. That's just not possible.
Right.
So how do you prove that these things are safe? I think that's going to be a big challenge. And for me, that leads back to a better trust model. If you can't prove all of the things, what you're left with is trusting the people who put the model together, who tuned it, trained it.
It's more of a reputational kind of check first.
That's right.
Like, everybody knows DeepSeek, right? You read the license agreement, all that data is going to China, on their servers, right? And so that's pretty easy to go, yeah, you know what? We probably don't want to trust this.
Right. We can't prove it, but you kind of don't feel comfortable about it, right? And the same is true of many of these other components. They might be derivatives of a popular llama model or an Anthropic model or something like that, but somebody changed it. Do I trust those people? Maybe it's okay.
Maybe.
But maybe it's not. And that's where I think this ultimately ends up going, and trust around open source is not something we've nailed down perfectly well either.
True, but we definitely know trusted sources to go get open source.
We do,
right?
For sure.
It still could be nefarious because whoever's developing it could still have nefarious purposes, but we have repositories of places we typically trust to go get open source software. Do we start to build those sources? Are those sources being built in a similar way?
So like the repository, certainly like Maven Central that we run is the trusted source for open source Java. But that doesn't inherently mean that you trust every single person who's putting something in there, right? And in some cases you can, because you start to look at foundations, Eclipse, Apache, these types of things, and they tend to have a better vetting process. It's harder for malicious actors to get things through many eyes. So you can start to layer that trust in. But there's millions of projects out there that are sort of just one or two people that are working on them. They're not associated with a foundation. And as we sit right now, it's very hard to understand who they are. Can I trust them? The XZ Utils attempted attack that we saw last year is a case of that, where there was a new committer who was probably a state actor, trying to slip things in. And so like we're just starting to really grapple with this on the open source side. I think actually the need in AI is going to be bigger. And I think the good news is it's actually going to force us to accelerate the whole thing. So whatever we do to solve the trust problem with AI is going to also be applicable to open source. And I think there's probably going to be a step function in our ability to do this. So I think actually it's a good news story as long as we do it quickly. If we leave that door wide open, it's going to be a problem for AI specifically.
Right. Inventory, metadata, what else? Are there other ways to understand? I think the biggest challenge for me is determining what the models do and the outputs of the models and stuff that you can't see until it's running, right? There's only so much you can do statically in these libraries and try to pull metadata. But then when they spin up, do they do something crazy? Do you see this evolution in not only, and we've kind of seen this in application security as well. You've got your static analysis, but then you have to understand what it's doing in runtime and almost compare the two. Like, I expected it to do this. This is what I analyzed statically. Here's what it's actually doing. Do they align? And it's the yin and the yang of the runtime versus the stack. Is that where we have to evolve in this space a little bit?
Yeah, I think that's we talked about that yesterday, right? That I think there's going to be an increased need for behavioral analysis on the runtime to detect the anomalies, because if a prompt is causing the system to do something nefarious, it's probably going to show up in the amount of CPU and processing that is happening for that prompt. It would hopefully look like an outlier, right? So I do think for the models and the behavioral analysis, because it's not deterministic, but you can kind of start to build trends of what's normal. And start to look for the outliers. So yes, I do think that that's going to be, it's almost by definition going to be the equivalent of SAST and DAST on our normal code side.
Yes.
The only way to really understand it is at that runtime.
Yeah.
So I think it will sit in that same spot of the portfolio as sort of like belt and suspenders of understanding when something goes wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that evolution. Companies that are struggling in this, where should they start? Like, where do they start? Do they start with policy, I think, or do they start with inventory, then put in policy?
Yeah.
Like, okay.
You need to start with inventory, defining the policy. They will say we have a policy of it not being used.
Yeah, right.
Until you can do the inventory
Right.
authoritatively, how do you even know if your policy is even effective? So once you do the assessment, you get the inventory, then I think it provides the motivation to actually define and enforce the policy, not the other way around.
Yeah.
Because they've effectively done it and it's not working. And we saw the same thing with open source.
I know. I
you
saw
can't use
this-
open source, and yet 90% of your software was open source.
What was
so.
like 2 years ago, we saw this huge uptick and people were like, oh, it's all about AI, and everybody was rushing to try to test stuff. And then organizations went, whoa, time out. We're going to put policies in place. We're not going to allow you to do this until we understand the potential concerns around this. But it didn't matter because people are still doing it anyways.
That's
right?
exactly right. And that's where the inventory, the visibility becomes important.
Yeah.
Because without that, how do you know? How do you know that the policy is being followed? You could just make an edict and that's nice. It's not worth the paper it's written on.
Correct. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's always been part of the fun in security in general.
That's
anyways,
right. That's right.
is alignment to policy. One last question. How much intellectual property concern should organizations have in their core software by using these other types of LLMs? Because I know building a software product, there's certain license types I stay away from because they get me into IP trouble. I assume the same thing exists here?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the license of the data is very important there.
Yeah.
But if you're worried about the IP of your stuff, that's a new dimension, one that's covered by that top 10. Understanding, is your data going back to a service? Is it being streamed somewhere? Because, in these AI models, the power comes from exposing it to your data. So it's almost worse than a piece of software that might be siphoning, one or two things in the old model. In this model, you're just like handing it everything, your whole source code, potentially, all of your data. Again, that's where the power, it's by definition, you need to do that. But if you can't trust it, you don't have the data about what's happening. Is the model training off of the back end of that? You can never get that data back. It goes into the model and it's there forever.
Right.
So yes, that is one of the big fears. And that's why you really need to be careful about that. And, imagine you were building a healthcare application. Your developers put some model in there for a very small thing, but it had access to all the customer input data. Now you're talking health records, for example.
Exactly.
Right? That your developers didn't have access to, but at runtime it does. Now, if all that's being shipped off and trained on, that could be a really big problem.
It's not just an IP problem, it's potentially a privacy breach problem, too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right, it's both. Yeah, it really depends on what data is being funneled into that particular LLM.
Yeah, scary stuff. Always a pleasure, Brian.
Yep.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
If you want to learn more, please visit securityweekly.com/Sonatype, RSAC. Brian, scary, but good.
Yep.
Thank you for joining us again. All right, folks, stick around. We got more interviews coming here live at RSAC Conference 2025.
Welcome to RSAC Conference 2025. We're here recording live from the CyberRisk TV studio in Broadcast Alley at Moscone West. I'm your host, Mandy Logan, and joining me for this interview is Mo Aboul-Magd, VP of Product, Cybersecurity Group at Sandbox AQ. Welcome, Mo.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm glad.
Yeah.
And I've got to say, I would imagine being in your position, that being at RSAC, let me get this correct, was exciting because you are actually working with Sandbox AQ, which is developing so many things that are AI and and eventually quantum related.
Yep.
So when you are walking the show floor, when you are meeting with people, does it feel like enhanced excitement to be on the inside of what everybody is talking about?
Oh, definitely. I think coming to RSA is always a great experience. It's the biggest cybersecurity conference in the world. There's just so many companies here doing a lot of really different things. It's a great opportunity to talk to customers, hear what people are doing, like what they're worried about. But yeah, definitely. I think it's really fun, especially this time around of, being at Sandbox AQ, where we're really trying to push the envelope around AI, around quantum, around kind of large quantitative models, and kind of seeing the trend of AI being mentioned a lot. And I've been hearing a little bit about quantum and post-quantum coming up as well. And it's really encouraging to see and really exciting that, we're here kind of pushing that envelope and we're starting to see these trends really kind of take off.
And quickly, because of your computer science background, so when you were a freshman just looking into all of the possibilities, and you look ahead now, you're going wow, I'm in it, I made it, I am doing what I dreamt of back then?
Oh, definitely. When I was a freshman, the cloud wasn't even a thing. The clouds were actual clouds, which just rains down water on you. But yeah, I think seeing what's happening now, I don't think anyone could have really imagined it at that point, way back then. And even I mean, we were talking about this before, of just being in San Francisco and just seeing the number of Waymos that are driving around is pretty wild, how many there are. And that's all driven by, advancements in AI, advancements in technology. So it's definitely an interesting and a very, very exciting time too.
It is. Now, will you please tell me more about Sandbox AQ?
Yeah, definitely. So we originated in Google, so in Alphabet and in the Moonshots division. We spun out of Alphabet in 2022. The beginning of the mission for why Sandbox kind of started was to try to figure out, is there cool problems? Are there problems that we could try to solve for at the intersection of AI and quantum? So that's where the A stands for, is AI, and then the Q stands for quantum. Spun out of Alphabet in 2022. Since then, we've had 2 fundraising rounds of just under $1 billion. So a lot of really great investors, really kind of backing what we're doing and really believe in what we're doing around large quantitative models, and applying those to kind of different sectors of the of solving kind of a bunch of real world problems, which is super exciting.
Well, can you tell me one? What is one real world problem that LQMs are solving?
Yeah, definitely. So maybe I'll describe what LQMs are, and then kind of dive into some of those problems. So everybody knows large language models. They've really taken off with ChatGPT, where it's really kind of text-based interactions and trained on basically all the internet and cat pictures. So really great for customer service types of interactions, where you want to have a chatbot where someone kind of talks to an LLM and then it brings you back kind of some answers. LQMs are trained on numbers. They're trained on numerical kind of information and really meant to solve real world use cases. So one of the examples is within Sandbox, we have a division that's focused on helping with drug discovery or material simulation, where using the training sets that we come up with, they're generated by the equations of chemistry, and to be able to then simulate how different molecules are going to work with each other, so that we can really accelerate drug trial times, for example. And we look to implement the same type of thing for cybersecurity as well, which we can definitely dive into. But it's really around training on numbers, finding the quantitative relationship in all of this vast amount of data that we're analyzing very, very quickly, and then surfacing really interesting insights for you to solve actual problems.
So that makes me think you're talking about predictive security.
Mm-hmm. It's definitely one aspect of it.
But how does that play out? So for somebody in the field, somebody who is on the security team or in the SOC, what would they see that you would say goes, yeah, that's exactly part of LQM's ability to predict what is coming?
Yeah. Maybe I can. Maybe I'll use ActiveGuard as sort of the example of what we do.
That was just released last week, right?
That was. Yeah. So that's our cybersecurity product that we released. So it's a non-human identity and cryptography management platform.
Non-human identity and cryptography management platform.
Yeah.
You might need to come back to that, but
yeah, no, definitely.
Go ahead.
We can dive into that. So, effectively, what we do with ActiveGuard, with the way that we leverage LQMs, is we plug into what we call the security exhausts of your organization. So like you as a company already have a bunch of different security tools deployed out there, and those tools are generating a large amount of data. So we pull that data into our systems, our large quantitative models analyze that data, and then is able to surface a lot of really interesting insights in that data. We're able to surface in real time, what exists out there inside of your environment, what are the real-time threats that exist and the real-time risk, and then also be able to help you close the loop with kind of very specific ways to be able to go and solve those problems. And LQM sort of sit at the heart of being able to kind of surface that real-time threat and that real-time insight for you.
Okay, so what is an example? Like if they're given a report and it says, here's your key action step now, can you give an example of what that might be? Yeah,
definitely. Maybe a great use case to dive into is been talking to a lot of organizations about like post-quantum readiness. So this is where quantum computers are going to be coming out soon, and basically the encryption that we're utilizing that underpins basically
it's done for.
It's done for. Like
right.
it underpins all of our digital worlds. So quantum computers are going to break that encryption. So I've been talking to a lot of organizations who want to figure out, well, where's my risk? Like where am I actually exposed to this? So what we're able to do is they leverage a product like ActiveGuards to plug into their existing environment. We pull in all of that data. We surface for them, like what our LQMs are able to surface are, here's all the cryptography that exists. We found it all. We've got full visibility into all the cryptography, all of the credentials you're utilizing across your entire environment. Our LQMs are able to present that in a way that's really easy to understand and consume as well. So not a lot of noise, just kind of very focused on just here's the exact list of things that exist. And our LQMs are able to surface a couple things. One is, hey, we found a key that's not post-quantum safe. This is a problem. And then we're also able to analyze, give you kind of real-time insights as well of like, this key is being utilized in real time right now. We've detected like some anomalous threats happening, like someone is utilizing this, let's say you're a retail company, and you suddenly see a spike in someone utilizing this key or their certificate or this credential in January, and your peak season was during the holidays. Our LQMs are able to kind of pull all that data in from your systems, analyze that, and surface those types of things for you so that you can really quickly be able to act on them.
So, and outside of the full security stack, they in general, with your clients, they don't have other platforms that are providing the same insights?
No. So that's a great question. They have products that solve sort of slices of the problem. So they have some products that might give you, small visibility into here's my certificates that exist, or some visibility into here's some secrets that might exist that my developers hard-coded into my code. But they don't have a product that holistically looks across the entire environment, from your applications to what's being used in your network traffic to what's being actually sitting on your servers and your endpoints, and gives you a single pane glass view into absolutely everything. So you have full end-to-end visibility.
That makes me think that not only with the consistent intake of data, the data flow that you're getting from all of your users, but also with your positioning on AI and quantum, that probably ahead of the curve at Sandbox AQ with thinking of what is coming after quantum.
Yeah.
Like once it's here.
Yeah.
Can you share anything on the forward trajectory of Sandbox AQ?
Yeah, definitely. I think this is a really interesting problem because it's one that it's a problem that exists today. And that's why we're excited about it, and all the customers and organizations I've talked to are excited about it. But it's a problem that's going to become exponentially more complex and more challenging in the near future as quantum computing comes in, as quantum tech takes off, and even as the use of AI agents really begins to rise as well. So like take AI agents, for example. I think that's a good one where it's not far out. Like we're seeing that adoption now.
Absolutely.
Where a lot of organizations
and we're working quickly to billions.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah, it's because they drive productivity. Like organizations want to adopt AI agents because they drive productivity, so they're really eager to utilize it to do things like develop code or develop applications for you. And like you mentioned, like there's well over 1 billion AI agents that are out there and being utilized. Now, some of the problems with AI agents is the security around it really isn't that strong. With I think you see this trend kind of with any new technology coming in of like,
Yes.
wow, tons of value, let me jump on and take advantage of it. And security is the last thing that you think about.
Right.
And it's not any different here. And one of the aspects of security, which is a challenge with AI agents, is how do you have visibility into the credentials and the non-human identities that these agents are using to go and access data from this machine or access data from this bot? And these AI agents are autonomous, so you don't really know what they're going to decide to do next. So that's a really interesting problem, but it's not one that is a future problem, and it's not one that's a future problem when AI agents really take off even more or quantum comes out. It's a problem that exists today. Like in all the organizations I've talked to, there's really no full visibility into all of the credentials and how their secrets are being utilized, or their keys or certificates or crypto is being utilized.
Right.
So problem exists today. It's one that's going to become exponentially more complex with AI agents and with quantum tech as it comes out. So what's interesting, I think, and exciting, working at Sandbox is we're solving a real world problem today, but we're definitely, we're solving a problem that's going to become even more acute, I think, as time goes on. That's a really interesting space, I think, for us to be in.
It is. I mean, it's still, to me, it gives me the feeling of living the future.
Yeah.
Riding the wave of what is already here,
Definitely.
and yet you're so well positioned for being at the forefront of what becomes standard. And for any moment in time, that's a privilege.
It is.
That is a huge privilege.
It really is.
I'm curious, so with it's ActiveGuard, right?
It's ActiveGuard, yeah.
ActiveGuard, are there any free trials, or how does the audience get information on?
There is, yeah. So we do have a free trial for ActiveGuard, so free trial for 30 days. So anyone can hop into the product, utilize it, start to use all the features with it. On our website, activeguard.com, on there is all the information. So you can go in and learn more about the product, about the use cases, things like that, and then be able to sign up for a demo. And then our team will get back to you and take you through a demo, and then sign up for the free trial as well.
What is the time to deploy?
Time to deploy is really fast. So it's a SaaS-based product. So in terms of kind of getting started, to go from there's nothing to deploy inside of your environment. It's entirely SaaS. It scales. The architecture is meant to scale, especially with like all that data that we're pulling in and analyzing in real time. It has to. And because we're plugging into what we call your security exhaust, the time to go from starting to see value is super short. Basically, we've got integrations with companies like Palo Alto, with CrowdStrike. So if you're using those products already in your environment, it's a couple clicks in our UI to be able to connect those to ActiveGuard. And then we start to show you real-time insights into visibility into all of your credentials and crypto, and then start to immediately show you the risk associated with it as well, and how do you remediate that risk. So the time is really, really short to be able to go from starting to value.
And what is something you've heard of that you didn't expect with a customer who did deploy Integrate? Is there any story you can give us that was something like, didn't really expect that outcome?
Yeah. I think it's the visibility that they suddenly are able to get. I was talking to a customer earlier, and what they were sharing was they're trying to get ready for post-quantum. And they were sharing, well, I know what I know. I know, if everybody in the organization followed things to the T, like here's where my keys and my secrets and my credentials live, I know where those things are, but I don't know what I don't know. And I think what organizations have really been surprised by, and it's been really cool to be able to see, is just the sheer amount of volume in terms of just where there's crypto and credential sprawl is across the organization. It's popping up in areas and being utilized by systems or applications that they just absolutely didn't even expect to have happen, which is really cool. It's really interesting to be able to see. A little scary, but also cool.
But that has to be satisfying once it's mapped and
Definitely.
That's fantastic.
Yep.
No, thank you so very much for sharing.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. To find out more about Sandbox AQ, please visit securityweekly.com/sandboxrsac. For all RSAC 2025 coverage by Cyber Risk Alliance, please visit securityweekly.com/RSAC. Thank you again, Mo.
Yep. Thank you.
This has been fantastic. Now, stick around. We'll be right back after the break to wrap up from RSAC 2025.